So tonight what we want to be talking about is solving inequalities. And so if you remember, an inequality is different than an equation. Equations are very strong. That means two things are identical. An inequality does not actually tell us what something is equal to, but it does narrow it down. Numbers are infinite, and so if we can narrow down any of those options, we've at least still narrowed down our option. And so when we're talking about inequalities, we're talking about things like greater than and less than, or greater than and equal to, or less than and equal to. These are what we mean by inequalities. So we, again, don't exactly know what a variable is equal to, but we do know half of the numbers that it's not equal to. So this is greater than, this is less than. Things to remember. Less than, less points left. It's always pointing to the left, so this is a less than sign. If it's pointing to the right, that is a greater than sign. A lot of times in elementary school, they'll talk about that greater than. You want the alligator to eat the bigger number, and that is true. But when we're reading it, we do need to know which one faces which way. So when I'm reading it, this is a greater than sign, and this is a less than sign. And that's our inequalities. Things to remember about solving inequalities and solving equations is actually the steps for solving them are exactly the same. The rules that we've been practicing for solving one-step equations and two-step equations and multi-step equations, the steps are exactly the same when we're solving with an inequality. We just want to remember one major rule, slight change, is that if we have to multiply or divide both sides of the equations. Now this is very important. Both sides of the equation. It doesn't mean if there is a negative number on just in the problem. That's not what we're talking about. But if to solve it, I have to multiply or divide both sides of the inequality by a negative number. By a negative number, then I have to switch the sign. That means it changes from being a greater than sign to a less than sign. And so that's the only difference when we're solving inequalities from when we're solving equations. And so that's something that you're going to want to remember. If we multiply or divide both sides of an inequality by a negative number, then I have to switch the signs. So a less than or equal to sign would change to a greater than or equal to sign. A greater than sign would change to a less than sign. And so that's something that we want to remember. So if I'm solving an inequality and I have 2x plus 7 is less than or equal to 31, and I'm trying to solve this inequality, just treat it like an equation from the beginning. So when I subtract 7 from both sides, because that's what I need to get rid of first, we're doing the order of operations backwards. So I get rid of the 7 and I'm left with 2x. Just like in an equation, this doesn't change. You know, the equal sign doesn't change. 31 minus 7 is going to be 24. And now all I'm left to do is to divide by 2. Now notice what I divided by. This is what I'm dividing by. That is positive. So I don't have to worry about changing the sign. So x, the less than sign, is going to stay the same. And 24 divided by 2 is 12. Now this is my answer. So it doesn't mean that x necessarily equals 12, but it is either equal to 12 or it is some number that is less than 12. So that's just not one answer. So generally, for our answers, we like to put our answers on the number line. And this allows us to kind of show a visual representation of the numbers that could be an answer. So if I'm going to do a number line, and let's say here is 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, so forth and so on, my happy little number line. Things we want to remember when we are graphing an answer on a number line. We need to remember directions, and we need to remember how to mark the number. Things you want to remember. We use a closed circle or a dot when it is less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. This is the equal to. If it can possibly be equal to the number, then we use the closed dot. If we use an open circle, that's for just less than or greater than. It means it goes all the way up to the number, but it can't actually be equal to the number. So we're leaving out the number itself. So for this one, since it is less than or equal to, I'm going to actually put a closed dot on 12 because it can be equal to 12. We're including 12. And then the other thing we want to remember is which direction do we want to draw our line. So when we're drawing our line, we want to make sure that we go in the right direction. So in this case, I want to always remember that less is left. If x is less than, then I'm going to go to the left, always. Less is left, greater than is to the right. Less is left, so the L's go together. Less is left. So in this case, x is less than, notice the arrow is pointing left. That's also a reminder. Less than, so that means that I want my arrow to go this way. So that means that all the numbers on this side of the number line are possible solutions for x. So less is left. Closed dot for equal to, open dot for not equal to, greater than is to the right. Another example. So if I have negative 2r plus 3 is less than 18. No, yeah, 18. Okay. So for this particular problem, if you remember from when we were doing the multi-step equations and everything, I want to distribute, use my distributive property. So I'm going to get negative 2r, and then negative 2 times positive 3 will be negative 6. Solving equations, the next thing we have to get rid of is the subtraction. So we're going to add 6 to both sides, and that will cancel out. And that's going to leave us with negative 2r is less than 18 plus 6 is 24. And then our last step is going to be to get rid of the negative 2. So I have to divide both sides by negative 2. And this is where we need to be careful. The number I am dividing by, now it's not the number up here. That number doesn't matter. But the number that I'm dividing both sides by is negative. And that means that I have to switch my sign. It is extremely important. So my negative 2's are going to cancel out, and I'll just have r. But my less than sign is going to have to switch. I've got to switch it. So that's going to be greater than, and then 24 divided by negative 2 is negative 12. So now I have r is greater than negative 12. All right, big deal. I can't, if you forget to switch it, you're getting the entirely wrong side of the number line. That could possibly work. So we want to make sure we're using the correct side of the number line. And so when I draw my number line, here's my negative 12. Notice I always kind of start with that number. That way I'm not drawing like this huge number line. I just need a few numbers on either side of it to get the correct effect. So then this is negative 11, negative 10, negative 9, negative 8, negative 7, negative 6, negative 13, negative 14. Don't forget negative numbers, you know, they go the opposite direction, so they're backwards. So this is my number line. I do notice that it is not equal to. And when it is not equal to, that means I have to use the open circle for not equal to. And then for my line, I need to make sure that I look and I'm like, well, less is left, this is greater than, so I'm going to go to the right. And that's going to give me my arrow. Let's look at another example. So if I have 3r plus 15 is less than or equal to 5r plus 7. So we've got variables on both sides. And if you remember from when we were solving equations, when we have variables on both sides, we have to get our variables together on the same side. So I need to get my 3r and my 5r together. So I'm going to subtract 3r from both sides. That's going to give me r's on this side, so I just have 15 left on this side. My sign doesn't change. Now I subtracted. A lot of students see that and they're like, oh, that's negative. I need to switch the sign. Be very careful. I was not multiplying and I was not dividing. That's when we switch the sign. I'm just subtracting 3, and that's totally okay. That doesn't change our sign. So 5r minus 3r is 2r, and then we still have the plus 7. I just have to finish solving, so I'm going to have to subtract the 7 from both sides, and that's going to give me 8 is less than or equal to 2r, and then I'm going to have to divide by 2. Now I'm actually dividing, so I need to be careful, but it's a positive 2. So since it's a positive 2, I leave my sign alone. I have the r, and I have the 4. So if I'm going to graph my answer, I need my number line. And here is my 4. So 5, 6, 7, 3, 2, 1. I have a nice little number line. It is equal to, so at 4, I am going to use the closed circle. And this is where I have to be careful. A lot of students will look at this and they're like, oh, it's a less than sign, it's pointing left, so less is left, I've got to do my arrow. The thing is, it's not r is less than 4. This is 4 is less than r. If 4 is less than r, that actually means that r is bigger. R is greater than or equal to 4. If your variable is not on the left side, please make sure that you're very careful and that you put your arrow in the correct direction. When we reverse it, when we move the r to the other side and the 4 to the other side, we do have to switch the sign. R is greater than. We want to make sure the alligator is still eating the same thing. R is greater than 4. So when I graph and I'm putting my arrow on my number line, R is greater than 4. So I want to make sure that my arrow is going to the greater than side. Make sure that you pay very close attention to details when you're dealing with inequalities.